Welcome to my palette of chaos. I've got some method to the madness out here. I'll start with white in the corner and tend to go from lights to darks in general in color order, with some tertiaries or extra colors I use more often on this side, as well as variations in purples, which can go to blues, and mixing areas around here. I usually clean it about once a month and scrape it all off like this with a big old painting knife or palette knife to get some of this dried stuff on here. I also use my wonderful spray bottle to keep it hydrated. If I'm gone for the weekend, I'll usually give it a spritz, and it's covered with a sheet of plastic to seal it all in. I'll wrap it around the edges and tuck it under. And then you see the stripe under here. This is a 50% gray and a black, and then I've painted white, or just found a white cardboard or something underneath here, because this palette is actually clear, and you can do really cool things with that for all sorts of things. Even printmaking, honestly. If you did clear glass, you could do some cool monoprints, but still have lines to follow. There's all sorts of reasons to have that. It's a tempered glass palette. I believe it's a 12 by 16. It's a little fuzzy. And then on this side, whites down to all my blues and different things I have created down here. You can see some of them are getting a little gnarly. I use a lot of landscape painting colors, so I do tend to work with probably at least 3 different blues at a time. And usually more yellows too, but I usually put my Naples yellow over here, so I've got a big green mixing area. So it's a little chaotic right now, looks kind of dirty. These guys in the middle are my mediums that I mix with the majority of my paints as I go. I mix the color I want first with this one, because this will dry clear. This is acrylic gel medium. This is a gloss gel medium. I use it for so much stuff. It's basically clear acrylic paint with no pigment, so it will dry clear. You have to mix your colors before you add that, because it's clear, it's not going to affect your final color. This stuff, however, is the super fancy, professional, fancy wallpaper spackle. It's drywall mud, basically. And, not wallpaper, it's drywall mud. And I'm using this as an experiment instead of modeling medium, which is marble dust in an acrylic carrier. It's a fraction of the price. It's designed to be permanent on walls, and mixing with acrylic, we'll see how it does. It tends to want a bit more of the plastic stuff mixed in to stay flexible. There's lots of pros and cons. I might do a video just on the experimental mediums, especially if you comment below if you want that, and what particular thing you want mixed in with acrylic to see what happens. I haven't really done too many time tests or put in the oven, or like light fasted tests with mediums, but once things in acrylic, it's usually stuck in there real good. Anyhow, for those that care, I usually have a cerulean blue. Sometimes I have a whole bunch I need to use up. Love my phthalo light blue. I'll usually have a spot for an ultramarine or something. I love Prussian blue, nice and dark, depends on the painting. And then light shades of that. I don't buy that many pre-mixed, pre-canned colors that like super lights. I work with a lot of colors, I guess, but pre-mixed light greens and light blues are my favorite, so that's for the skies and things. And Naples yellow. I don't usually use pinks. Usually a cadmium or cadmium yellow substitute. Got some browns, which could go next to purples if I wanted. That one is a Naphthol red, which is a fairly cool red for me. It doesn't mix the greatest with the blues. I prefer more magentas with that, but right now I just didn't put it on there. I sometimes tweak these piles for whatever paintings I'm doing at the time, and I'll make more piles because I'm new to the pre-mixing. I usually mix as I go. This one's the Jacksonine purple. I'm probably not saying that right. I don't know. It's a lovely deep bluish purple, which works great with these oranges. I love purples and oranges together. And then this little guy, it's a lighter version of that, very, very opaque purple, which actually works really nicely with the blues for skies, flowers, whatever. And then this section I'll usually use for mixing those other colors I use a lot for the different paintings. So I've got some sky color right here, different greens. I'll often put a deep phthalo green around here, which also mixes gorgeously. I use that a lot. But that is the general tour of this palette of chaos. I also have some plastic plates that I use sometimes, especially if I'm traveling. It's okay for acrylic. I usually tend to need to soak these a little bit to scrape off some of this other stuff. You'll see some chaos around there. And then sometimes, yes, it does leak underneath, which is why you get a little dirty underneath. But I will use something like this guy or a flatter one like this. So this is a painting knife, and you can tell because it's kind of offset. You know, you see it looks regular like this, but when you turn them, one of them has a little angle, one of them is completely flat. If you remember correctly, this is a palette knife, this is a painting knife, because you're going to be lifted off the surface of your canvas, and your knuckles aren't going to drag in there unless you have skill like me, in which case your knuckles are going to be everywhere in your paint, and it's not going to matter if it's like that anyway. But basically, you've got little spatulas for your paint. These are good for scraping batches of paint. I like it nice and flexible, so be careful where you get them. They can snap if it's super cheap. And then I'll wipe them on paper towel. That is a general palette, palette tour for you, and I'm sure that mentally damaged some of the cleaner painters out there seeing this palette. But I'd like to see how you organize yours and how you keep on refilling and cleaning in between your mixed paints. What's your special technique? Maybe you just do it more often than I do. Cleaning in between these and the mixed ones. The trick with acrylic to keep it wet, besides the spray bottle, is to have enough of a glob there. I was taught this by a professional artist, that if you have a teeny tiny amount of acrylic paint, it will dry out faster. I guess you could say there's more surface area to wet paint ratio. I guess that's the only explanation I could think of. But with the larger glob, there's more paint inside there. It's a group hug. It keeps itself moisture inside, and bigger globs of paint to reuse is actually better for acrylic. So there's that. And the plastic sheet I also learned from her. Good technique. We're working with plastic after all, and it's a good way of recycling the plastic sheets you might get on canvases and other things like that. See, like right here, that's the plastic sheet underneath it that I tucked under, and so it makes it look a lot messier than it is. It's the watery paint seeping through the other side. That doesn't bother me too much. It just looks a little messy, especially if I were to demonstrate paint mixing. But I usually paint mix with this big guy right here, so I can go back and forth. You notice how we're using the back of these? I've seen a lot of people go on the front too, which is good for scraping, but that's more likely to snap. This little thing right here is the weakest point, so I use the back, and I learned the hard way. I had that the hard way. That's about it for this tour.